All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be looking at the South Carolina Gamecocks 2024 preview and prediction, looking at this coaching staff. Shane Beamer back for his fourth season, 2018 mark so far. Doel Loggins, second year in the role as offensive coordinator. Clayton White, third year in the role as DC. 18th ranked recruiting class in back-to-back seasons. 5-7 campaign in 23. 5 losses coming by double figures. 5-7 was the preseason mark I had last year for SC. So hit that one on the nose. Look at this offense. You'll see not available for key returnees, Nick, because they don't get a lot back on this side of the ball, and they lose a lot. Spencer Rattler, Xavier Legette, Trey Nux, to name a few. Return only 4 starters, top 3 pass catchers, and their top 3 rushers are gone. A lot of turnover in the portal, losing 14 guys. We also added 14 as well. Plenty of contributors we're going to talk about. They also landed 2 top 40 recruits in this incoming recruiting class. So not bad work, but again, a lot of turnover. LaNorris Sellers, elusive, solid speed guy for being 6'3", 245. He's overall a dangerous runner, strong arm quarterback who certainly needs to continue to refine his release. Zip in the middle of the field is good. He can let it fly vertically, very deep on throws, looks pretty solid. He's noted to be a good off-platform thrower as well as his mobility. They also picked up Robbie Ashford, who has really good speed, an impressive runner, not much as a passer, but you can use him in special sets and he'll be effective. And then Davis Bevell from Oklahoma if they need a better arm. What do you make of this quarterback room, Nick? It was obviously a big get when they landed Rattler. He now departs, and they seem very confident in Sellers. And I think this is not that bad of quarterback room on paper.
They recently announced Sellers is going to be the starter. Shane Beamer came out and said that Sellers is going to be his guy this year at 6'3", 245. I think the frame is very interesting. Young man, 18 years old, came out of high school as a highly rated player in the state of South Carolina, right? Played at South Florence High School in the Florence of South Carolina. Was committed to play at Syracuse at one point. Ended up swapping. He was the 4th prospect in the state, 16th best quarterback in the country. So some highly rated players, accolades for this young man coming out of high school. I think it's, a high upside move here. He has some opportunity to be a star for this team. He appeared in just 3 games last year, but he was 4 for 4 on his passes with 2 touchdowns and kind of special sets using him. I do like what they can get out of him. I think Sellers is a really exciting prospect with a nice arm and solid footwork. Robbie Ashford, formerly of Auburn, transferred around a little bit. I was at Oregon at one point, moved around a little bit, spent time at Auburn, had some good games at Auburn, occasionally a good game, had a decent game against Alabama a few years ago from the state of Alabama. Now he ends up at his 3rd school heading here to South Carolina. Is he going to be involved? I'm not entirely sure. And Davis Bevell coming over from Oklahoma. Is he going to be involved? Potentially, I think you could maybe figure something out there. I think Ashford's a solid player. I think Ashford still has a lot of high upside. I think Sellers here has a ton of high upside. I think he can be a really solid player to kind of kickstart this offense that was really poor last year at times.
The running back room, a complete makeover here as well, all transfers. I really like what they did, though. Raheem Sanders coming over from Arkansas last year just wasn't effective at all. Really struggled to stay healthy, and I think he had maybe 200 yards, less than that maybe. Good elusive runner between the tackles, though. Good speed, keeps the feet moving, certainly runs with an edge. Tries to use power too much in the open field, though. Does run well behind his pads. Limited route tree and pass blocking techniques, not all that great, but at 6'2", 225, he's proven to be an effective back. You also look at Oscar Attaway from UNT. This is a guy I've been a big fan of in the past. Great ball security, only 1 career fumble. He significantly improved his pass blocking ability last year. Jawarn Howell from SC State was greatly efficient at the FCS level, bringing power and vision to the Gamecocks. They also have Juju McDowell, 5'9", 180. The only guy under 215 pounds in this room, missed all of spring of a broken collarbone. He's been in the program a couple of years. What do you make of all this size that they bring to the table here, Nick, and what I think is a pretty sound room, but they don't have a lot of speed, and if this offensive line doesn't perform, that could be an issue.
A very heavy and slow-paced running back room here. Raheem Sanders comes over from Arkansas, where he was really good in 2022, right? 1,400 yards rushing for 10 scores. Was all first team All SEC in 2022. Last year he was banged up, battle injuries, only played in 2 games and had 76 yards and 2 scores those 2 games before falling out of favor down there in Fayetteville, and now he finds a new opportunity out here in Columbia. Was really solid in that bowl game in 2022 as well. A top player out of the portal in terms of running backs. I like the size on him, 6'2", 237, but he's a bit of a slower back, right? It's not going to be that sort of off the block, super fast kind of guy that you really would want to see. This room does lack that with Attaway and Jawan Howell. I do think these are 2 solid players they added as well who have nice high upside, plus Sanders. I think Sanders can take the lead here and get back to that 1,400 to 1,500 yards season mark that he had 2 years ago at Arkansas. But is that going to be enough to kind of move this offense that was really bad last year, 85 yards per game on the ground, 129th in the nation? They certainly need a lot of work on the ground.
And then you look at a receiving room that, didn't have many options last season. Like, yeah, obviously I was a massive fan of his. Knox, the top 2 pass catchers, top 3 really are gone. Complete makeover here as well. But another room where I really like what they did. Amari Huggins-Bruce comes over from Louisville. A guy who has good speed, was used on jet sweeps and pop passes a few times. Mainly a slot guy last year, but has that versatility and the aforementioned speed. Jared Brown from Coastal Carolina has great speed of long strides. He went from 7 drops down to 2 this past season, so he's certainly worked hard to focus on hands. Good intermediate crosser, effective cutter at full speed. He's tough to bring down in space. Needs to improve his release, route running as well, to better incorporate that downfield speed. I think you'll see some improved game from him. And then Nicholas Harbor, Nick, this guy is expected to completely take over college football, the number 1 ranked athlete in last year's class. Absurd size for being an ex-wide receiver, 6'5", 242. Great strength and elite body control. Has speed after the catch. He's quick off the line of scrimmage. Overall, great athletic traits. He was compared to Kyle Pitts when he was supposed to be a tight end, but looks like he's going to play outside wide receiver. And so far this year, he's been breaking all kinds of school records for the track team, and it's possible he might find himself playing for Team USA at the Summer Olympics, Nick. That's something his head coach fully supports, which would certainly, delay his abilities to contribute in camp this fall. But this seems like a player that's going to absolutely just dominate CFB, because everything I just read about you is mind-blowing, including his, opportunity as a track star.
I think the opportunity as a track star is really cool and a really exciting thing to see in college football. It makes a lot of sense to me that, a guy like Shane Beamer would support the opportunity for his potentially top wide receiver to go and compete out there in the Olympics over there in Paris at the end of the summer. I really want to see what that looks like. I think the Olympics could use some more guys like that. He's a really solid player. A 10.2 100-meter dash time, a really impressive time on the ground there. Super fast. I was reading about Usain Bolt in the past, who was a freak athlete there. At 10.2, you're not that far off some of the top sprinters who finish up in the bottom half of those races in the Olympics. So very interesting stat when you look at that. I think Harbor's a really exciting player. I like the frame on him at 6'5", 241. Can really move for a big man, right? That's a huge frame that he's able to move. Had a few catches last year, about 200 yards receiving and 1 touchdown. Solid numbers in his first season. He kind of gets his foot in the water in the SEC, the product out of Washington, D.C. area. Huggins-Bruce, I think he's an exciting player at the Z. You could use a lot with him. A really nice portal. I like Jared Brown a lot in the slot. I think Brown, if he cuts down on the drops and is really focused, gets his hands working, a really solid ad from across the state at Coastal Carolina. Him in the slot, I think, is a very exciting player to have. This room lacks depth, but these 3 names jump off the board at you. Certainly Harbor is a guy that a lot of people are going to keep their eyes on. One of the more exciting players in college football right now.
Yeah, the depth, like you allude to, isn't all that great. They do have Gage Lavarden from Miami of Ohio, who's a great downfield playmaker with speed at 5'10", 165 for them. Elijah Caldwell, 3-star from last year's class. Luke Dottie makes that transition to wide receiver from quarterback, a player with great speed and stride. It'll be interesting to see what he can contribute in this room. Tight end Brady Hunt didn't play last year, but was a reliable pass catcher in 23 for Ball State. Joshua Simon dropped 0 passes a year ago. Pretty good, well-improved room they have despite the loss of their top 3 pass catchers, including a high-end NFL draft pick. Overall, I think this is a very good receiving core, but the offensive line's got to hold up if they're going to be given opportunities. 118th in sacks, 123rd in TFLs allowed, and it's concerning, Nick, because last year when we talked about the O-line, we didn't expect much improvement, and that's exactly what we got, nothing at all. They only lose 2 starters, though. Left tackle Tree Babaladai started as a 4-star true freshman, struggled significantly in SEC play. The hand placement comes off as desperate. Technique needs big help. We've seen a lot of true freshmen as of late, though, starting in the SEC, and they've all struggled. So no reason to really worry right there currently. Ja'Kai Moore, left guard, enters his 6th season. Hasn't ever been very good. Vershawn Lee at 6'4", 320 should be the full-time center. He's been a good run blocker and has versatility. I'd consider him to be a key piece. Trevon Bogg started at right guard as a 3-star true freshman, allowed no sacks, was more adequate in conference play, but struggled to end the season. Kason Henry enters his 3rd year at 6'6", 310. Hasn't seen the field much. Now to the players that will look to crack the lineup. Marquis Anderson was a top 10 interior line recruit last year. Torsilli Simpkins was a great center for NC Central, 6'5", 308. Kamar Bell from FAU has experience, but isn't really all that good. He's going to provide some depth for him, though. And then from Oklahoma, Aaron Park, 6'4", 320. A few snaps under his belt. High upside player. They should see him crack the lineup. This offensive line should slightly improve, Nick. I know Beamer has been active in recruiting and in the portal. It's a work in progress, right? But right now it's a slow work in progress. And if it, slows any more, could cost him a job.
One thing that certainly worries me is this is a very young offensive line. Baldadale is a sophomore, true sophomore. Trevon Ball is a true sophomore. Carson Henry is a redshirt sophomore. So these are very young guys, 3 starters there. Ja'Kai Moore is a graduate senior. And then obviously Vershawn Lee is a senior. So he has some experience right there. And he's the guy you look at as, kind of the big guy for this offensive line. A great leader at center. He has some good SEC experience. He's played for a few years now at 6'4", 320. I do like him to be that leader. Really good in run block. Has some nice versatility. Some other guys you rattled off, some of the transfer players, could maybe you get some of these guys in here, maybe you move a player around or two and try and figure out. But this is a bad unit, in my opinion, that's just not really playing that well. They were not great last year, and obviously, I said the running stats earlier, 85 yards per game. Certainly, some of that does fall on the offensive line and their struggles as a whole unit. Definitely not really looking forward to seeing what this unit can do this year. I'm not very high on them at all.
Yeah, they got obliterated in the opener. 9 sacks allowed against UNC. And like you said, a rushing attack that was just horrendous. And I do like the revampments they made, but 129th is, an effort of everybody, really. So I think these running backs can help uplift that a little bit. Verdict for me on the Gamecock offense, Rattler, Leggett combo really allowed this offense to be better than it probably should have been. The poor line play costed them worse than we imagined. Again, as that run game was incredibly absent throughout the season. Beamer's done a good job in the portal, adding more talent in the supporting cast, mixed of a young QB and an intriguing skill set. I think we see improvement across the board and better balance, but the ceiling on those improvements are certainly capped if the offensive line can't pick up the slack. So I'm happy for this offense. I like the ads they have. It'll be fun to watch at times, I think. Look at the defensive side of the ball. Unit that was, quite fair, but also, a unit that was less than desirable. They lost 11 guys in the portal, added 8. They do return 7 starters, though. Struggle to generate negative plays. 121st in tackles for loss. But this defensive line, I think, is capable of a lot more. Tonka Hemingway, a guy at D-tackle, is excellent feel for working off blocks. High-effort pass rusher. Real strong tackler. Has good power in his hands. Allows him to really shed. Has 6'3", 295. Impressive burst. Was a good pass rusher, improved a good bit versus the run. I like his flexibility along with 7 pass breakups, so a do-it-all player for them. Big-time addition here from Georgia Tech and DN Kyle Kennard. Good explosiveness, has a good motor, like his ability to start outside and work across the tackle. Uses his hands well with good length. Alex Huntley, a guy at 298 pounds, has been a quality pass rusher, multi-year veteran. TJ Stander stepped up in a big way, leading them in sacks and tackles for loss at 6'5", 298. DeAndre Jules, he's going to join the interior from Pittsburgh. He was a horrid tackler, but at times was a helpful run defender. And Gilbert Edmond returns to SC after a 1-year stint at FSU. He was a quite solid pass rusher and playmaker back in 2022. 250-pound edge Desmond Umeozulu and Brian Thomas return, but established depth remains a tad scarce at the edge department. I think this will be a D-line that's better, Nick. I think this is very impressive to see Shane Beamer be able to recruit guys like Kyle Kennard. We just talked about some of the guys on the offense. These guys definitely could have went to other places, but this is some Beamer ball their mind into.
He got some solid ads out of the portal. Right? Kennard is a really exciting player to get from Georgia Tech. I like him at the edge, kind of get that good speed coming off the edge. You bring back Edmond, who was previous with the program, didn't really work out for him at Florida State. Had a good season in 2022, like he alluded to. Some solid numbers there. You return him, 2 good ads there. I think DeAndre Jules is a really good run stopper. He doesn't really add a whole lot in terms of the pass rush, but he's good against the run. Does miss a few tackles here and there. Huntley was solid last year, 33 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Hemingway, 32 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, plus 7 pass breakups. Really gets his hand up on the line and blocks the ball. Really solid there for him. TJ Sanders, 9.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. Like you mentioned, led the team in both those categories. Really good to return that production. 4 pass breakups and 43 total tackles for Sanders as well. I like the rotational ability here. I think, Elijah Davis, another guy who's been around the program for a couple of years. You can rotate him and out. Brian Thomas Jr., is he going to get some playing time potentially? Maybe. Nick Barrett, a senior, hasn't played a whole lot, could be rotated in potentially. So I do like this front unit right here. I think there is some high upside potential. I think Hemingway and Huntley on the interior are really solid big guys that can get after the quarterback.
Now you look at the linebacking core group that we previously were worried about, especially last year. We just didn't think it was ready for the compete in the SEC. And at times you certainly saw those struggles, but Devo Williams impressed. Great initial burst, comes downhill with some authority. Has no issues bulldozing in the blocks, needs to show some more patience and coverage though. He was the top-end playmaker for them. And Bam Martin-Scott was surprisingly a great tackler. Didn't miss one all year in 275 snaps. Really turned up in the final few weeks of the season. Demetrius Knight, 6'2", 247, a very fluid mover. Nation's top-ranked coverage backer last season at Charlotte. Also had 96 tackles very intrigued to see what he can do for the Gamecocks this year. Bang Ali Kamara arrives from Pitt, quite sound run defender, played a lot of snaps, significantly improved this linebacking core. Are they ready to compete in this conference, though?
I think this is a good unit, but it's not an incredible unit by any stretch of imagination. It's a serviceable unit in the SEC. Debo Williams, your top returning tackler, 113 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, a sack, and 3 pass breakups. Really solid numbers there. Gets over the century mark. Debo is a good leader in the middle of the field. I really do like what he can do. A nice hard-hitting player. Martin Scott's a really solid player. 38 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him as well. Good numbers there. They added some nice rotational depth out of the portal, and Knight Jr. and Kamara, 2 really solid adds from different programs. I like Williams there at the middle linebacker. I think he's a good captain of the defense and a really hard-hitting linebacker.
Now you look at the secondary, we figured this would be a pretty strong unit for the Gamecocks last year, and they were great down the stretch. The last bad game they played was midpoint of the season against Florida. Top CB Marcellus Dial departs. They do return veteran O'Donnell Fortune, though. Hasn't created many plays on the ball, but only allowed a 55% comp rate. Emery Floyd only played in 3 games last year, a guy with great speed up to, 6'1", 195 now. Judge Collier played a solid bit in each game last season. Jalen Kilgore was a pretty efficient player in the slot as a 4-star true freshman. Was one of the best tacklers on the team. Also made a good bit of plays on the ball. His brother Gerald transfers in from Tennessee Tech. Played a similar role. Didn't play much at safety, though. DQ Smith has been a good sound tackler, but he's been pretty abysmal in coverage. On the other hand, safety Nick Omunawori should really ascend to one of the nation's best safeties after 2 strong seasons. A big, long DB at 6'3", 218. He's been great in the box. He can tackle. He's never really been a liability in coverage. Tennessee and Florida targeted him a good bit vertically, but other than that, he was a good player. And then David Spalding, another longtime veteran, returns to provide depth. I'm not all that worried about this secondary, Nick. I think this is an area that they can certainly improve in. A lot of young players, a lot of newfound experience under some of these safeties' belts as well. I think this is going to be a strong point for this defense. I know they're 101st against the pass, but I think they're going to get much better and ride that momentum they ended the season with.
I think they'll be able to improve from that 101st ranking next year. Certainly, Jalen Kilgore is a good player. 76 total tackles for him, 1.5 tackles for loss, 6 pass breakups and a pick. He's your second leading tackler. DK Smith, 2 pass breakups, a pick for him. 73 total tackles, solid numbers there. Not really great in coverage, but he's a nice hard-hitting player and above 70 tackles. Nick Omunawori, like you said, 71 total tackles, 8 pass breakups, led the team in that in terms of returning players. 2 picks for him as well. Really good player. You can move him around. O'Donnell Fortune, I like him. 6 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, 39 total tackles. This unit last year was really good at breaking up passes. You see a lot of guys with that 6, 7, 8, and even 10 pass breakups last year. They got a few picks here and there as well, some solid numbers in that regard. So I think this is a productive secondary unit. They got beaten coverage earlier in the season, but they got better as time went on. This is a unit that I think can get up certainly higher than 101 in the nation. I do expect a nice improve for this secondary unit here.
Fortune's return is very big. He had 2 picks and 6 PBUs last year. Corner is a big issue because they don't have a lot of proven depth, a lot of young players there. He's a senior. Everyone else is pretty much an underclassman. So that's going to be one area of concern. But I think right now, this is certainly going to improve. And I definitely think those young players will certainly come on. Overall, the verdict for this defense, pretty all right unit here for South Carolina. They really surged over the last month to enter 2024 with some of that momentum after a tough start to the year. I think this interior D-line has some good players, and Kennard is a great addition to the pass rush that was just horrid last season. The linebacking core last year was very concerning, but had some guys step up and added good transfers, meaning this run D should take some nice strides. Secondary is one of the SEC's best safeties. I like Kilgore, but the rest of the young guys at corner I definitely worry about. Also hope Smith can make those strides in coverage. I think this defense improves, and if they can tune up their playmaking, their ceiling will only grow higher. Looking at the prediction for South Carolina, what an interesting team to get a read on. As Beamer Ball, Nick, is in full effect. Our prediction last year was spot on for this team. 2024 is even harder to gauge, though. The offensive line probably won't take meaningful steps forward. But the supporting cast is greatly enhanced alongside a young quarterback that might struggle or boom big time. I'm leaning with a better balanced unit overall. I think the defense has the ability to play really hard in games with impressive players at all 3 levels. Problem is the schedule is incredibly tough. I think they ultimately steal a game at home from a higher ranked opponent, but they might not have the explosiveness on offense. A QB is probably going to be limited as a passer early on in his career. I certainly think this is going to be a tough home environment this year. See them beating Texas A&M to get to the 5-7 level. I think hosting Missouri as well gives them an opportunity to win, and they've really made the games against Clemson close as of late. I think that a lot of these games at home are probably winnable for South Carolina, Nick. I know your prediction's saying otherwise, and I guess mine is as well. But I wouldn't be shocked if they lose a couple of these games by 1 score, because I really believe in Shane Beamer. But the offensive line is something that's going to be too much to get over.
I really believe in Beamer as well, and it is harsh them giving a 4-8 record. I have them losing that game to A&M at home. I just think A&M will be the better team on that day. They're going to play a lot of close games this year, and I think there's no reason to panic in Columbia. I think Shane Beamer is the right guy. You can see that with the recruiting. We talked about it early in the episode that he's recruiting in some really talented players, beating out other top SEC schools for players that you really wouldn't expect them to beat out, guys that are not from South Carolina, guys that are not from the area. But Beamer has wide appeal with that name, from his father's legendary time at Virginia Tech. It's a tough schedule, right? You start off with an easy game against Old Dominion, but then you jump right into it at Kentucky and then hosting LSU in back-to-back weeks. Kentucky, I think, are going to be a very good team this year, so that's a very tough early road trip there. Ole Miss, a really phenomenal team in the SEC this year. A lot of people love Ole Miss. A lot of people love Missouri to be a playoff team this year. Those are two tough matchups at Oklahoma, at Alabama, back-to-back. Brutal draws there as well at Clemson. Clemson should be a better team in the ACC this year. Obviously, there's still a lot of question marks down there with Dabo and company at Death Valley. And then you got your win against Vanderbilt. You got a win against Wofford, a team that you should easily beat, plus Akron as well. Certainly a tough schedule, but I don't think there's any reason to panic. We can certainly look at this back at the end of the year and see how they played before we talk about the panic button. But I don't think Shane Beamer's seat should be hot at this point in time. I think this is just a tough schedule with a team that's transitioning, looking to contend in the future.
Yeah, just with the losses they have, I just don't see it in them beating those teams. But if they can reach bowl eligibility, that means they certainly accomplished that. That'd be an impressive mark for this season as a building block moving forward. Maybe it for today's episode, Nick. Like I said last year, it's hard to pick this team to do this bad, record-wise. But it's just a reality of the sport. Sometimes the team will certainly be rooting for to improve, though.
Certainly a team we hope will figure it out and get better, because I love Shane Beamer. I know you do as well. I think he's a fantastic young coach. I think they will figure it out with the recruits they're bringing in. It's just not their year right now. It's going to be a tough season, but I think the future is going to be bright in 2025 and 2026.
You did see them play a lot of close games last year. Lost by 10 at Georgia in a game a lot of people really thought they might have won. Lose the 2 at home in Florida, blowing a double-figure lead late. And they only lost to Clemson by 1 score as well. So they certainly hung in against some of the tougher competition. Never really seemed too battered. They never got beat by 30-plus points or anything like that. It's going to be it for today's episode. Appreciate you joining me, Nick, as always.
Sounds good.